Is Tevin Coleman going to be a bust in 2019? How many wideouts should you draft ahead of Odell Beckham? And how do you handle C.J. Uzomah in leagues next season? Plus, the 2018 FFPC Super Bracket Champion Justin Brandwein sits in for Dave Gerczak with me tonight as we take a peek toward next season and where the value lies with the Tampa Bay receivers. We've got a great show for you. Justin Brandwein is here. I'm Eric Balkman. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football. All of you Balkaholics and Gerczak addicts, welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com. I'm your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman, and my co-host is normally the patron saint of fantasy football, the Dizzle, Dave Gerczak, but sitting in for the Dizzle tonight, who has the night off, is the $10,000 winner of the 2018 FFPC Super Bracket competition in his first year in the FFPC after he dominated other online leagues for more than a decade. It is Justin Brandwein. Justin, thanks so much for doing the show with me tonight, man.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. You know, this is just about as exciting as winning the money.
Oh, well, listen, trust me. Once you do the show, you're going to be like, well, you know what? I think winning the money was a little bit more exciting.
Well, we'll see about that.
We will. I mean, time will tell. We'll find out how it goes. But I'm excited to have you on as, once again, very, very pleased with the upgrade we have in co-host tonight from Dave Gerczak to Justin Brandwein. Coming up on tonight's show, who's going to be the lead back in Houston next year? Can Jordy Nelson be more like the player he was at the end of the season this year in 2019, and much, much more. Now, I am going to give a shout-out to the chat room. However, I am not able to load it on my end. Our audio engineer, Bryce, and our producer, mutual friend, Rob, are also having the same issue. So I'm not sure if anybody is in there right now, but I will give a shout-out to you. And in case I can get it working on that end, or on my end, I will take questions in the chat room. You can also connect with us on Twitter at HSFFHour, at Eric Balkman. Dave is at David Gerczak. Facebook.com/HSFFHour is where to reach us there. 347-426-3682, 347-GAME Ovah if you want to give us a call tonight. highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com is, of course, the inbox. If you have any questions for us, now is the time to send them. We'll try to get to the chat room questions if it is live for me and Rob and Bryce. The tweets and emails and fantasy feedback coming up later on in the show. I want to remind everybody, if you have not noticed, the world-famous playoff challenge with the FFPC is indeed live. It is more than 20% full. This year, a $200,000 grand prize and a $750,000 prize pool. That is up $150,000 from last year. Still only a $200 entry. 4,250 teams will be competing in this. If it does indeed sell out, I'm still skeptical. Dave and Alex think it will. 10-player lineup, 1 player per team, and you only have, let's see, what is it? Today is the 28th. A week from tomorrow is when the deadline will be. So you have 8 days to get in. Take advantage of that while you can. A new high-stakes lowdown with 2018 FFPC off-the-grid champions Rob Gallucci and Ryan Gawkin is live. It is not on rotoviz.com/podcast yet. At least it was not about an hour ago. It is, however, on the Spreaker channel. So if you want to listen to me talk to Rob and Ryan about their big off-the-grid win this year, you can do so. Go on Spreaker.com, search for High Stakes Lowdown, and it is the first episode on there. So that is what is going on there. Let's talk about what is going on here. Justin, once again, thanks for joining me. We're going to get into fantasy. We're going to get into the super bracket. I want to hear what it was like winning that cash and seeing you march through that bracket the last month of the season. But tell the listeners, when you're not enjoying fantasy football and you're not winning $10,000 in the super bracket with the FFPC, what are you doing for a living?
Sure. I'm a supervisor at a nutraceutical company. We ship orders domestically and internationally. It's great. I've been there 6 years and work with some really nice people. And
gives you a lot of time to do your draft prep and your lineup management and everything like that for your fantasy football teams, I'm assuming.
Well, the staff is very supportive of my needs, so take from that what you will.
That is fantastic. That is the type of job I think we all want to have. That is great. Congrats on that super bracket title, my friend. Can you let us know, I want to go back to September when you actually drafted this team live at Planet Hollywood. Tell me what you thought of the team right after the draft. And then, again, as you started, you make the bracket, you start winning a couple of games. What did you think about this team? What was it like watching it? Your team, you put up some big numbers in late November and December, so there's some stories there. But your thoughts initially that I want to get is what you thought about this team when you looked at it right after you drafted it.
Oh, this is fantastic. All right, well, first, let me just give a shout-out to you guys at the FFPC. I mean, it's just an amazing league, and if people are out there listening who only draft online, I strongly encourage you to come to Las Vegas, participate in the live Vegas draft. It's unbelievable. My own experience a few years ago, I first saw you guys. You were across the street at Caesar's Palace, and my co-manager at the time, he has a lot of friends who do the main event. We walked over there, and I just could not believe the sea of draft boards down the hallway and all these older gentlemen, older than I am, who are into this. I just couldn't wait to participate. It took a few years, but here we are.
Yeah, well, you're very welcome, obviously. We appreciate the kind words. We love that you had a good experience. I always have a good experience going out there and hanging out and seeing these people. The majority of the people out there, I only see them once a year, so it's always cool to catch up. And I think I'm kind of the same way with you. The first time I went out to it, whatever it was, 9-10 years ago, it was a little overwhelming, and it's slowly gotten bigger and bigger, and it is a great experience to do. And not only Justin, not only did you enjoy yourself this year, you drafted a hell of a team too.
Yeah, that's business as usual. I've been playing Madden ever since I was a young boy, and I would go into franchise mode and draft teams. That's all I would do. I would play the first game of the regular season and quit about midway through. I just really got off on the draft process. So I've really been drafting teams my whole life. I do nothing but live in mock draft rooms for months before the season begins, trying from different spots in a 12-team format. I mean, I just love drafting.
When you and I don't know at what point it became real for you, or when you kind of realized, because I know, like, when I draft teams in where I'm competing against all these other teams, I'm kind of like, okay, I'm going to draft a team as strong of a team as I can, but I know that there's a lot of heavy competition, and I certainly never expect to come out in first, especially in a field like this. I don't know what your attitude is for this. Certainly, you knew you were going to be competitive, and I'm certain that you believe that you were going to be in the thick of it throughout the rest of the season. At what point did it become real to you that you were kind of like, you know what, this team's got a shot to beat all comers here the last month of the season, or maybe you realized that halfway through the year, or maybe it was right away when you thought, hey, this team is a strong one, and I got a legit shot to win this 10K.
You know what? It was week 5. Getting back to your question about the path of the draft and my thoughts on the season, I was very upset once the season began. Aaron Rodgers was carted off the field week 1, so theoretically there goes your season. Fortunately, he came back in the second half, and we were still in the ball game. I was also kind of down because I wanted Patrick Mahomes, and my co-manager wanted to go a different route for a couple rounds in a row, and wouldn't you know it, when he finally came around to letting us select Mahomes, the guy right before us took him. So not only was Rodgers a bit banged up, especially during the first part of the season. Mahomes is showing that he's the best player in football, and here I am upset with myself because I wasn't assertive enough, and I was just not a happy camper. Add that to add to the fact that week 2, Greg Zuerlein decides to give you a 0. He's inactive. Chris Carson, week 4, without warning, he's inactive, giving you a 0. It was a tough start. We had 2 players give us a 0 without any warning. In the first 4 weeks, we were 1-3, and it was not looking good.
What was the difference in week 5? I mean, did you have a massive week 5 score? When at that point, why did you think like, okay, now this team's about to get hot? What happened at that point?
At that point, the zeros were behind us, and we put up an overwhelming 200 points. And just with a full lineup, we just know that our team is solid. I mean, even when we had the 0 the previous week with Carson, we still scored $162.
And it was one of those things too. It's like, now all of a sudden you believe in your in this team that okay, we had some bad luck initially. We got off to a rocky start. Now is where we're going to get hot. Now we're going to, have the positive regression to the mean, and you guys really picked it up. How was the waiver wire this season? How integral was that in this team? Did you pick up anybody, not necessarily that really dominated for you the entire season after you got them on your team, but players that got you through rough stretches, players that got hot for a few weeks that really carried you? Was there anybody that you picked up off the waiver wire in this league that was really integral to your success?
I guess there'd be a couple of moves there. That's really my co-manager's forte. I like to give him the waiver wire responsibilities. I kind of decide on who's going to play and have more control during the draft, but you got to be a team and have people have their own little responsibilities. He picked up Jameis Winston before he was officially announced as the starter, the first time around. So in week 7, when Aaron Rodgers had his bye, we played his waiver wire pickup Winston as opposed to Mitchell Trubisky, who we already had on the roster. Now, Winston did 9 points less than Trubisky, but the reason that's beneficial is because you don't know how anybody in any of these other leagues are doing. So when we finished with the number 1 seed and the number 5 seed overall in the tournament, without seeing how many points or what the record is of other teams in your own category, it affects the seeding. So everything just worked out perfectly for our path to the title. It was all about our first round matchup. So we only would have beaten maybe 6 or 7 teams. We had a very low point total week 12. Week 12 was tough because the Chiefs and Rams had a bye. I mean, looking at your main event, the number 1 team overall in the main event couldn't make it out of his league play because he has a bunch of Rams and Chiefs players, and he's immediately done.
Right. Yep. No, it's totally true. And one of those, and that was Kurt Kikas, who's been on the show before too, and I talked to him about it. And he was loaded with. I mean, he had like Hill and Kelsey and Mahomes. He might have had Gurley on that team as well. It was crazy. He might have had Kareem Hunt. I can't remember, but he had a bunch of really, really talented Chiefs and Rams players that, I mean, he made it to the championship round, but he did not get, I don't believe he got his league title because of that. So clearly that's a massive issue. Now, Justin, you're going to, and by the way, Justin Brandwein is our guest tonight, the 2018 FFPC Super Bracket champion here on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour with Eric Balkman. Help me out on the pronunciation on this next guy. I'm talking about the Cincinnati tight end, CJ, and how do you pronounce his last name properly?
That's going to be Uzomah. CJ Uzomah.
CJ Uzomah. Okay, perfect. I'm glad I got this right now. He had some pretty good weeks this year. Obviously very inconsistent, but you didn't have to count on him a ton because he was your number 3 tight end, I believe, behind Eric Ebron and Travis Kelce, who you had on this team. But Uzomah is an interesting guy for 2019 because we're not really sure what's going on with A.J. Green as far as his contract goes and everything like that. Is Uzomah going to be a top 10 tight end for you in drafts next year, or are we putting the cart before the horse a little bit with that? How do you view Uzomah going forward?
I view him as a jag. The jag is just a guy. There's nothing special about Uzomah. I mean, right now I could just say Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle, O.J. Howard, Ebron. That's the top 5. I mean, you have Delaney Walker coming back. Njoku is pretty solid. Hunter Hurst Henry, he's going to be coming back. I mean, you don't even need to be. I listened to a couple of your podcasts to get prepared for today, and I heard you speaking about this man in other leagues. To me, I kind of feel like you just have C.J. Uzomah in some of your leagues, and you just kind of pick other people's brains about if you should keep him or not, or your thought process for drafting next year. I think you just love this guy so much.
He's one of those guys where it was just like, and you're right. I mean, like, a part of the reason I like doing the show is because I can ask real money winners, people way smarter than me, how they feel about guys. Because Uzomah for me was a guy that was always on the fringe. Like, well, I had to keep him on through the meat of the season in a couple of teams where I had Evan Engram because there just wasn't anybody else. But after Engram got back, it was kind of like, okay, do I cut this guy? Do I keep him around? What do I do? And I kind of never knew what to do with that. And then I take that back. In another league, I had just him and Greg Olsen. And then obviously when Olsen went down, I had to play out the string with Uzomah. Obviously those teams didn't end up very well at all. But one tight end.
It's amazing. I'm sorry. It's amazing. But season after season, the tight end position is extremely thin.
Yeah. No, and this year more than any year I can remember, it was just, it was Kelsey, it was Ertz, and it was Kittle, and then after that it was kind of like inconsistency. And O.J. Howard was fine until he got hurt. You know what I mean? It's Eric Ebron. Eric Ebron actually had one of the best seasons for tight ends, and I can't believe I'm saying that, but it was true. When you rattled off all those tight ends, Justin, a guy you didn't mention for 2019 is Rob Gronkowski. How do you feel about him, and where does he slot in for you?
I feel like he retired before this season began, and next season will just be a formality of that. It's like mixed martial arts. As soon as the word retirement comes out of your mouth, you're done.
Yeah, and we have talked about. The thing is with Gronk, it's like we've mentioned this before, and he obviously, there were rumors that he said he would retire if the Patriots did indeed trade him to any other team, other than the Patriots. And he showed us flashes this year, and I feel like those flashes are going to be enough for somebody else in my leagues next year to take him before, like, he's not going to slide to a spot where I'm comfortable taking him. And even if he does come back. Then I'm fine with that because there's other tight ends I can roll with, but I'm certainly not going to be in the business of overdrafting Rob Gronkowski in 2019 if he's still playing in the NFL.
No, his late second-round selection status is officially retired, just like his playing status next year.
Right, yep. Aaron Rodgers, you drafted him in this league early, and he like you said, he got carted off early. He never really was Aaron Rodgers until when you really needed him most, championship week. He puts up, I think it was like a 47.8 or something like that in the title game for you. Is he a guy that when you look at drafting quarterbacks, and I don't know how you normally like to draft quarterbacks, if you like waiting on them, if you're willing to strike while the iron's hot, if a guy is sliding, an elite guy like Rodgers or what have you, I'm sure he won't be the first the first quarterback on your board next year, but is he a guy that you'd be willing to take the plunge early on in drafts next year as your starting quarterback?
Absolutely. The guy is a tremendous thrower of the football, and he can't be stopped. I mean, that game against the Bears in, week 15, people were saying, is he a starter? Is he not a starter for this week? He didn't throw a touchdown. That was the first time all season, but he still had decent numbers, even against a defense like the Chicago Bears. Aaron Rodgers is going to get it done, and when he had every reason to throw in the towel, he showed the heart of a warrior. He's out there last week against the Jets, and look at how he played. Absolutely, I would take him. To me, when you're drafting for fantasy football, you can pretty much take 23 teams and cross them off immediately. You have no business drafting players on these teams. You should really narrow it down to New England, Pittsburgh, the LA Rams, the teams that
Kansas
are
City.
going to put up points and have great – exactly. Yes, teams that have quarterbacks and they're going to put up a lot of points. You have no business taking players in all these other teams. When people want to talk about a Kenny Galladay and just throwing out any names like that, to me, when I come into a draft, it's already an absolute certainty. Like, I'm not even taking this guy. It's already known who I'm taking. It's done. Like, coming into this year, it was all Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones, or Rex Burkhead and Sonny Michel, and just narrowing, just securing those teams' backfields. It's not like any one of those players individually are so great, but those teams are amazing, and they'll end up being pretty solid.
And the other thing, too, to keep in mind with Aaron Rodgers, he'll have a new head coach next year. Maybe it's Joe Philbin. I still don't think that's going to happen, but you got to believe that whoever the new head coach is going to be, he's going to have a good plan of attack for some fresh play calling, for some modern, running a modern offense that Rodgers desires to run. He's going to have Devontae Adams coming back, one of the best receivers in the NFL. And then you look at these two other rookie receivers that showed flashes this year in Equanimeous St. Brown and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. A lot of times they make a big jump from their rookie year to their second year. He could have some weapons next year, and obviously Aaron Jones showed what he could do on the ground too. So Packers offense is certainly an offense that I think will rebound next year. Chris Carson, you had mentioned him earlier. He was also an important member of your team here, Justin. Down the stretch, he was massive for fantasy owners. This is a Seattle team that used a first-round pick on Rashad Penny this year, and Penny really never got going. I think he had one really, really good game, but it was pretty much the Chris Carson show while he was healthy. As we fast forward to 2019, how do you see this backfield shaping up? Is it the Carson show again with Penny just mixing in here and there? Is it a case where they split the carries, or does Penny take over the backfield? Look into the Brandwein crystal ball here and let me know what you think about those two players.
Well, Carson's clearly the lead back. I mean, the eyeball test takes care of that. But Rashad Penny's presence shouldn't be concerning to anybody. I mean, Seattle runs the hell out of the football. So Carson's still going to get a normal workload compared to most teams. They just run the ball so much. And because they run as much as they do, they're going to need some solid backs who are able to do the same things so that they can't, go away from what they naturally want to do on offense, which is run the ball. Which is all they do.
Right, yeah, no, exactly. Similarly, well, I guess not similarly because Indianapolis has been throwing a ton this year, but Marlon Mack is another guy that was not a quote-unquote high-drafted running back. I think he was sort of at the tail end of the feature back list, especially when you consider that a lot of people were drafting Jordan Wilkins as an upside guy in the middle rounds this year in a lot of high-stakes leagues. Do you see the Colts signing a guy, not specifically Le'Veon Bell, I know they've been linked to him, but another running back in free agency that could ostensibly take carries away on the early downs from Marlon Mack? Or do you think he's going to be the guy next year? And if he is the guy, is he a third-round pick? Is he a fourth-round pick? Is that where you feel good about drafting him, or is that maybe a little too early? Tell me a little bit about what you think Marlon Mack is going to be for the Colts next year.
Yeah, third, fourth round, that may be a bit too early. I don't really see much that's all that special about Marlon Mack. He had those two great games back-to-back against Oakland and Buffalo, but that's why he had those games. Those teams are not that good, especially against the run. So I wasn't getting too excited mid-season when he put up those performances. If Indianapolis has a chance to get a guy like Le'Veon Bell, you say please and thank you. How much money do you want and for how many years?
Yeah, no question. I mean, and you talk about Indianapolis. I mean, they might sneak into the playoffs here as the 6th seed this coming Sunday night. And, you've seen Pittsburgh potentially missing the playoffs. You've seen, New England starting to really show the decline there. I mean, obviously Kansas City and the Chargers are very, very good. But the Colts might not be that far away, especially if they hit on a couple of defenders in the draft, which they did last year. If they do that again this year, they could be a force to be reckoned with in the AFC. The 2018 FFPC Super Bracket champion, Justin Brandwein, co-hosting the HSFF Hour tonight with me, Eric Balkman. I've been talking about 2019 a lot on this episode tonight. I know we got the playoff challenge. It's very exciting to talk about, Justin. But as I look forward to my draft preparation for 2019, at what point do you start getting serious about getting ready for your drafts next year? I mean, are you already in that mode? Do you decompress a little bit and kind of reset, refresh the brain, and then start taking a look at it after the Super Bowl? Do you wait until the early spring, early summer? When do you start really getting dialed in on your prep?
I don't want to sound too corny, but the answer would be now. I mean, this time of year, week 16, 17, that's when guys like, remember Arian Foster? I mean, that guy
Sure.
played well for a game or two down the stretch, and then all of a sudden he's a 4th, 5th round pick the season he finally broke out. So when you look at that, there's always guys that are ready to play at the end of the year. So if you see someone like Atlanta running back Brian Hill, Tevin Coleman should be going in the next season, and Devontae Freeman will come back from injury, sure, and he's their starter. but the average shelf life of running backs are only 3 to 4 years. Freeman's relatively small. He got paid, which is always a huge negative when considering who to draft. Stay away from players that get paid. He may have already ran himself into the ground. This guy, Brian Hill, if you're in a keeper league, he could be somebody who could become something really quick. Just like we were speaking on tight ends earlier, O.J. Howard may have been released. He's on IR. If you're in a league, O.J. Howard's out there, you got less than 48 hours before the season's over. Go pick these guys up. They could be keepers. It's never too early. But officially, as soon as there's mock draft lobbies available, I guess that's realistically when it really becomes time to get ready for the next year.
Right. Yeah. No, and then that's a good way of looking at it too. I think you make an interesting point about Hill too, because Freeman, there's some mileage there, and this is an injury that he should be back from, but you don't know how much longer how many elite seasons he has left. If Brian Hill, Tevin Coleman's not coming back to Atlanta. We're going to get into Tevin Coleman in a little bit, but he's not going to be a Falcon next year. And then you have Ito Smith, who flashed a little bit, but just, again, to borrow the Jag phrase, he was sort of just a Jag, for the majority of the season. And Brian Hill could definitely make a name for himself, and certainly the Falcons game will be one to watch this Sunday. We have a lot of emails.
It's all about opportunity. It's all about opportunities. The players just need opportunities. There's not much separating the talent. It's just about getting in the lineup and getting a chance to play.
And I totally agree with that, especially at the running back position for sure. That's huge. We have a ton of emails to get to. I want to save them later in the show, but Justin, I do want to read a couple of them that came in for listeners specifically for you. First one, Steve in Little Rock, Arkansas. He writes, what version of Jordy Nelson do we see the next year? The one that began the season or the one that is finishing it out strong for the Raiders? Thanks, Justin. That is Steve in Little Rock, Arkansas. Your thoughts on Jordy Nelson and a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde player this year. What are we going to see from him next year, assuming he is back with the Raiders catching passes from Derek Carr?
Yeah, he really did come on strong at the end of the year. If it is Derek Carr, then I like Jordy Nelson to continue what he's been doing. He's a guy that's shown to have a lot of chemistry with his quarterbacks and play very well when he has that chemistry. And if he's able to keep that with Carr going into next season, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't do what he did down the stretch this season.
Yeah, I think if there's any question that he has anything left in the tank, the fact that he is doing so well at the end of the season when everybody should be wearing down, I think that's all you need to really see from him, to know that he is not wearing down, that he still has more fantasy goodness in him, and you could probably get him at a pretty good deal in drafts, no question as well. The other email I want to get to right now. Go ahead.
You mind if I give out my email address really quick to
I'm sorry,
anybody that might want to?
Yeah, I wanted to do that at the start of the show, Justin. For anybody who wants to, if you're having any, fantasy football quandaries, if you have any questions, you want to pick the brain of the Super Bracket champion, Justin will give out his email here, and you feel free to shoot him an email with any questions you might have, and you'll be happy to answer them. Go ahead with that email address.
That's exactly right. I would be happy to answer them. And that email address is just my name spelled out fully, Justin Brandwein, W-E-I-N at the end, Brandwein, @hotmail.com. I put a lot of hard work into this, and feel free to shoot me any questions you want. I'll get a website up after a little bit of time. We'll see what kind of response we get.
Yeah, definitely. When the website's up, let us know, too, so we can start pumping it on here, because I know people are always after. Absolutely. People are always after fresh voices, fresh faces in the industry, and especially somebody who is already accomplished at the high-stakes level, winning the Super Bracket in your first year of participation. Certainly, people will want to know. One more email that I want to get to, and then we'll sort of get into the news around the NFL, Justin. Jeremy in Dayton writes, did you prep for the Super Bracket any differently as far as strategy goes compared to any of your other leagues this year? Jeremy, thank you for the email. I will say the Super Bracket, for anybody who's not familiar with it, it's a contest that switches to a 32-team bracket for the last 5 weeks of the season. So I don't know, Justin, if that had any bearing into how you constructed your team, how you drafted your team. Did you prepare for it any differently, or were you just trying to put the best team possible together?
Well, of course you want to put the best team together, but Yes, absolutely, and that is a good question. I did put a lot of thought into Week 12 and preparing for the stretch run because you're not allowed to make any waiver wire maneuvers after Week 11, so you are stuck with your roster heading into the tournament. So looking at that, we have Travis Kelce on a bye. We have Greg Zuerlein on a bye. We need a kicker, number one, and we don't necessarily need a tight end because we have Eric Ebron having an amazing season. But how could you put all your eggs in the basket that Ebron's going to remain healthy heading into Week 12? Could you imagine if you had no healthy tight end? That's why we picked up Uzama.
And
so yes, it does have a huge impact on it.
You have to be prepped for that, no question. You got to make sure that if injuries are going to take place or suspensions or what have you, that you have adequate depth on your roster where you're not taking zeros at those positions, no question. Justin, $10,000, a nice little chunk of change for winning the Super Bracket. Do you have any? Is that cash already earmarked for something? Do you have any plans to do anything with that, or are you just going to sit on it until something fun comes along?
Well, I'm actually owed a decent chunk of money from my co-manager from other leagues heading into this year, so we're going to have to get that settled up. So that money is probably just going to sit in my account for quite a while. We'll see if the money breaks up a beautiful relationship.
We'll see if there's a reason to spend it comes along with it. But we'll see. I mean, you obviously have a good rapport and a good dynamic with your co-manager. Obviously, with your strength being the draft.
Oh, I know. I goof on him a little bit, but I love him very much. He's been through some very tough times recently health-wise. He's doing very good now, thankfully. And I was just very mindful of that and just thankful that, he was able to make the trip to Vegas. He was there with me. And honestly, I feel like, someone upstairs was looking out for us and that, like we definitely deserve this is how I feel.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's
more so than me.
It warms the cockles of my heart to hear a story like that, for sure, to see you guys win that. So congratulations there. I also want to thank Football Guys, Roto World, Roto Pass, and, of course, producer Rob for tonight's rundown. Justin, let's get into it. Dan Quinn confirmed that Julio Jones is going to play against the Buccaneers, according to William McFadden on Twitter. He has not practiced a ton over the last 3 weeks with the hip issues and the rib issues that he's had. But he's been churning out really good fantasy performances week after week. He was he's going to try to be the leading receiver in the NFL as far as yardage goes this Sunday against Tampa, who we got 144 receiving yards against earlier this season. I'm just curious. Justin, we've always not made fun of him, but we've always poked fun at Julio Jones' failure to get into the end zone. For whatever reason, because he's so dominant inside the 20s, but just hasn't scored a ton of touchdowns. He kind of bucked the trend this year, and I think, even though he's getting up there in years, he's sort of an attractive player once again at the end of the first round, early second round for drafts next year.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even when he wasn't getting in the end zone, this guy's putting up a ridiculous amount of yardage. I mean, the receiving yard total that Julio Jones puts up, you can only throw out a couple of names like Antonio Brown that are going to compete with that. So he's always going to be viable up there. And Atlanta's been in the tank for several weeks. So Julio Jones going into Week 17, a bit banged up, saying he's going to play. I wouldn't read into that too much. He should be out there doing what he does, putting up as much numbers as he can,
We talked about his real life teammate, at least for another week, Tevin Coleman, earlier in the show. He's also going to be playing against Tampa this week. Jason Butt had that story on Twitter. Again, probably going to be his last game with Atlanta, and he will be playing against Tampa. Brian Hill, Jeremy Langford, and Tevin Coleman are the only available backs for Atlanta this week. Here's the thing. I own Tevin Coleman in one dynasty league, and I was actually not excited for Devontae Freeman's injury. I don't get excited over players' injuries, but I was excited at the opportunity that was presented to Tevin Coleman because he had a golden chance to really make himself a lot of money in free agency. And Justin, I really don't think he took advantage of it. I don't think he's going to get paid this offseason. I think he maybe sees a deal similarly to what Carlos Hyde signed in Cleveland last year, where it's decent, but it's not that great. And honestly, I'm not going to be that excited about drafting him next year either.
Yeah, I mean, it remains to be seen what team he goes to. And then also throughout the preseason, which running backs get hurt. You never know who's going to pop up and become relevant all of a sudden. So it's just a waiting game, one, to see what team he goes on, and two, just the circumstances leading into the season. But he did show that he's very athletic. I mean, not just this year in a full-time role with Freeman out. Even before Freeman got hurt, this guy was a great pass catcher of the football and has a lot of speed. So he can find a job in a few different places. There's plenty of teams that would be happy to have Coleman.
Yeah, and I think that's certainly the case. He's shown the flashes. It's just the consistency has always irritated me, especially this season. I just wished he could have done it on a more consistent basis. But it only takes one team, so maybe he will get a nice little deal presented by somebody this offseason who is looking for running back help, no question. One player who we know what team he'll be playing for in 2019 is Quincy Anoon after he inked a 4-year, $36 million contract extension. It was announced by the Jets Twitter account. Eric Edholm, who writes for Pro Football Weekly, says that the deal guarantees are worth a little bit more than $20 million. Anoon was good this year, even though it was in limited action. 38 catches, 449 yards, and 1 touchdown through 11 games. You look at what the Jets have going now, Sam Darnold, Robbie Anderson, Quincy Anoon. Anderson maybe is that deep threat, but Quincy Anoon coming off this injury next year, Justin, he should be a guy who catches a lot of passes, and you might be able to get him on the cheap.
Yes, you would think so. Anderson has shown well for himself the last couple of years, so you don't really worry too much about him. He can produce. He's done it with different quarterbacks now. Anoon, however, he's been injured for a couple of seasons now, and sometimes players just get hurt. They're just those type of guys, and Anoon is showing to be a guy that you can't really rely on. Similar to, what's his name in Houston, Will Fuller. They just can't stay on the field, certain guys. I mean, Anoon is showing that he could be one of them. Yes, if he's on there, he looks the part, but the question is staying on the field. And if they're not going to stay on the field, why take the chance in drafting him? And like I said, he's part of those 23, 24 teams that you should have no business taking anybody on anyways.
Right, yeah. The best ability is availability, and that is something that has dogged Quincy Anoon the past couple of years. So always something to be wary of if you are going to be looking to get in business with a player like that. A guy that I wish I had on more teams this year, Justin, Tyler Boyd. Now, he's not going to play this week against the Steelers. He was placed on injured reserve today, and then he'll obviously come off injured reserve when the Bengals season ends, just after the Steelers game. So he left the week 15 game early. He didn't play in week 16. He's not playing this week. But 76 catches for 1,028 yards on 7 touchdowns, 108 targets. This is, I hesitate to say that Tyler Boyd is going to be overdrafted next year based on this performance. I mean, he's going to be drafted higher clearly this coming season than he was last year. But I don't know how many people are super excited about Boyd next year, and I think I will be. As like a number 4 receiver, if I can get him like that, if I go receiver heavy early, I'm definitely into Tyler Boyd. What do you think? What are your thoughts on Tyler Boyd coming back to the Bengals next season?
I don't see any reason why he shouldn't have another solid, prosperous year like he did this year. Andy Dalton should be back throwing him the football. They've worked together for a few years. I'm very big on cohesiveness, quarterbacks with receivers for a number of years. A.J. Green is a guy that you can't really rely on. He can disappear here and there. He's the kind of guy that top cornerbacks can take out of games. If he's matched up with a Jalen Samuels, with a Patrick Peterson, A.J. Green's a guy you expect to do nothing that game. However, if you look at receivers like I had on my Super Bracket team, for instance, Davante Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, you're not going to stop those guys. A.J. Green's one of those guys you can take out. So Tyler Boyd, in those instances, when you're going up against top corners, will be able to produce a little bit more. I mean, there's no fluke in going for 1,000 yards in less than a full season. Boyd showed some flashes in the past, and it's not a fluke. I would not hesitate if you were desperate to take Tyler Boyd. But again, he's not on one of those magical 8 teams.
Right. Yeah, he's definitely not. And then you look at that division too. Baltimore's coming on. I mean, obviously Pittsburgh's excellent too, and Cleveland's looking like the real deal. So it might be a case of Cincinnati being in the basement there. For the next couple of years. People forget, and count myself as one of them. Tyler Boyd back in 2016, he was a second-round pick, and he was a guy that was bandied about in rookie dynasty drafts as a guy that could make a difference. He had the great career playing for the Pittsburgh Panthers. 6'2", 203. I mean, this is prototypical, alpha wide receiver size in the NFL. So don't sleep on Boyd. You may, and you're right. I mean, you may have to rely on garbage time for his fantasy value next year, which I always hate to rely on because Cincinnati I don't think is going to be good. But you can do a lot worse depending upon where he goes in drafts, and once they start up, we'll get a better handle on that for sure. But Boyd is a name to be paying attention to, and his team will be taking on the next player we're talking about here in Week 17. Mike Tomlin said Antonio Brown is undergoing tests on an injured knee. Jeremy Fowler had this on Twitter. Tomlin saying that the door is open for Antonio Brown to play against the Bengals, which is a must-win game for them. If Pittsburgh loses, they are out of the playoffs. They could still win and be out of the playoffs. But he was added to the injury report on Thursday. This is the exact same thing that happened to Juju Smith-Schuster last week, where he was added to the injury report Thursday. He did end up playing. It sounds like Brown will be out there. But here's the curious thing, Justin. Juju Smith-Schuster had a massive season this year. How does it break down in drafts next year between Brown and Smith-Schuster? I'll ask you for a prediction on what round you think these guys go in, and then do you think that's correct? In other words, if you say Brown's a first-round pick and Juju's a second-round pick, is that the way that you would draft them? Would you take Smith-Schuster ahead of Brown? How do you handle these Pittsburgh receivers next season?
Absolutely not. Antonio Brown is the best wide receiver in football and is the number wide receiver off the board for the past few years and should remain so next year. Juju Smith-Schuster, honestly, I haven't given that much thought what round he would be drafted in. Maybe early third, late second?
Yeah, I'm trying to get his stats up right now because I know he had the great season, and I saw his stat line the other day, and I was like,
holy cow. There's so many other number one receivers. You'd rather like Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas. Mm-hmm. I mean, you're going to go for all those guys ahead of him. Julio Jones. Yep. Someone's going to make the mistake and take Odell Beckham.
We'll get into Beckham in a little bit. I want to pick your brain on that. Smith-Schuster this year. So far, 106 catches for 1,389 yards with 6 touchdowns on the season. He also had a rush for 13 yards. So he's putting up the numbers. But, I mean, you bring up a good point. Ben Roethlisberger is having one of the best years of his career. Is this sustainable? Can Brown and Smith-Schuster continue to put up these numbers for a second straight year? Maybe. I don't know. But you're
yes,
right.
Absolutely. Without question. They're one of the top offenses in football. Roethlisberger wants another Super Bowl, and he's going to retire. He thought about retiring before this season. He's probably going to come back again. All his weapons will come back. It's going to be all systems go for the Steelers again. They're going to be just like they were this year. There'll be no drop-off.
But to your point, and I'll say this too, even though he put up those crazy numbers, I'll be drafting Devontae Adams before I draft Juju. I'll be drafting,
of course,
DeAndre Hopkins ahead of him, Michael Thomas, no question, Julio Jones. I mean, these guys, none of those guys have to contend with Antonio Brown for targets on their roster like Juju Smith-Schuster will. So I like him, but I certainly love those other players a little bit more. Let's see, we got about 17 minutes or so left in the show. Let's get into some more emails that we got from the listeners.
If you've got a question for Eric, Dave, or tonight's guest, send them a tweet at HSFF Hour on Twitter. Email the show at highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. Post it in the chat room during the broadcast. Hashtag your tweet with HSFF or just smack Eric in the head. That's highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com or at HSFF Hour on Twitter.
First email and fantasy feedback tonight comes from Wayne in Boca Raton, Florida. What's up, Balky and Justin? I'm already looking ahead to next year. Do you think Leonard Fournette slips to the late second round, and is he a good pick there? Thanks so much. That is Wayne in Boca Raton, Florida. I own Leonard Fournette in one league this year. It's a dynasty league. I mentioned it on this show before. And I was never all that excited about Fournette. He is really, really inconsistent. And, Justin, for me, it's very difficult to invest a first or second round pick in a guy who runs so hot and cold like Fournette seemed to do this year.
Of course. It's all about the quarterbacks in fantasy football. If you don't have a quarterback that can help you sustain drives and stay on the field, how can you be productive as a running back? Unfortunately for Fournette, he's had terrible quarterback play. The offense has just been just horrendous. Not only that, but the defense hasn't been the same. So the flow of the Jaguars has just been totally off. So you can't be excited to take Fournette in any round. Obviously, if he's still there and picks continue to fly off the board, at some point you're going to take the guy. But you shouldn't be taking somebody on a team that just shows no promise offensively.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna. He's one of those guys where, yeah, if he falls to me, I'll look at him. But man, there's at first and second round, dude. There's so many other players that and not just necessarily at running back too, wide receiver, tight end. I mean, there's so many more guys that I'd rather have for sure than Fournette. Let's get
exactly like Damian Williams just became relevant a couple of weeks ago. Damian Williams is a guy, you draft him in the second round, you should be happy. That'll probably be above his ADP, his average draft position, but I guarantee you that guy's going to be no drop off from Kareem Hunt, who's a late first round pick.
Then Damian Williams is a really, really interesting guy, and it got more interesting this week because he just signed a 2-year extension that will keep him in a Chiefs uniform for next season and the year after. Yeah, I mean, like, and the major competition he has, I mean, I don't even know how major it is, but when you talk about Spencer Ware, I mean, this guy is going to be, he turns 28 next year. His contract right now is, he makes $700,000 this year, and then he's a free agent. And they could easily not bring him back. Kareem Hunt's not coming back anytime soon. Damian Williams, I mean, he could be a really, really sharky pick next year. And if you draft early, like super early in like the spring or whatever, you could get a really good deal on Damian Williams.
No doubt. He can be a real difference maker, especially playing with Andy Reid as his head coach. I mean, this is a guy that utilizes that position. He's done it everywhere he's been. In Philadelphia, you had Brian Westbrook. In Kansas City last year when Spencer Ware got hurt, I was all ready to jump on the Charkandrick West bandwagon, but it looked like they drafted a rookie out of Toledo named Kareem Hunt. So I just said, I guess I'll just take Kareem Hunt in the third round. I'd never seen him play football before, but it didn't matter because things remain the same. Andy Reid, running back, there's certain trends to pay attention to, and the names change, but it's the same system year after year.
Let's go to a guy that we were talking about earlier in the show that I said we'd talk about more later on, and that time is now. Hey guys, how many wideouts would you draft ahead of Odell Beckham in your leagues next season? That is from Kenny in Chicago. And Beckham, well, I'll let you talk a little bit about him right away, and then I'll bring up some players here. But Justin, you are not a fan of Odell Beckham in 2019, is that correct?
Well, that's correct. He's extremely gifted. He's a great football player. He puts up numbers. It's not like he's a bad player, don't get me wrong. But the guy's been hurt the last couple of seasons. He started last year injured. He's ending this year hurt. And look at the quality of his quarterback play. I mean, Eli Manning has been completely, can I just say, dreadful. So who knows what's going to happen next season. They may bring him back, and if they do, there's going to be no change to what you saw this year. I have this draft board that I participated in front of me. I like to handwrite everything. Nowadays, people like to click on links to bring one page to the next. I like to just write everything out on one single page. But looking at wide receiver names, I could clearly find 8 guys I would take ahead of Odell Beckham, and he was a late first-round pick in my league.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right
Adam Thielen is kind of a coin flip. If I would take him over Beckham, Tyreek Hill, I would take him over Beckham. Michael Thomas, I would take him, and then obviously you got the slam dunks and
Brown, Adams,
DeAndre Hopkins, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, he's certainly not a first-round pick next year. There's a chance he might. I don't know if he falls to the third, but it's certainly possible that he does. So I don't know. I think you bring up a lot of good points with Beckham. I own him in a dynasty league. I plan on shopping him this offseason just to kind of gauge the interest and see what I can get for him. But I am not super excited for him going forward as well. Let's move on to, let's see, who's this email from? This is from Mike in Hanover, Maryland. If Djax moves on from Tampa like he says he wants to this offseason, how do you handicap the fantasy value of Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, and Adam Humphries? Thanks, gents. That's Mike in Hanover, Maryland. Thank you for the email, Mike. Are you excited about any of those guys? I mean, let's just assume Deshaun Jackson came out on the wire tonight that he wants to go back to Philly. I don't know if that's going to happen, but clearly he does not want to be in Tampa. Justin, do you like any of the guys between Evans, Godwin, and Humphries next year, given where you think that they'll probably go in drafts?
Yeah, I like all those players. They all had their moments throughout the year. Godwin, every time Jackson was out of the lineup, was putting up big numbers. He was a hot waiver wire pickup mid-season. Humphries, even had a few solid games in a row there. All the Tampa Bay wide receivers are in play. Tampa Bay had a great year passing the football. Fantasy-wise, the quarterbacks, the receivers, they were all very, very serviceable. I don't see any drop-off heading into next year.
Yeah, and the guy, I guess I'm a little bit more down on Chris Godwin. I still love his talent. I'm just not sure what happened, why he was just coming up short. He hasn't put up a ton of really good numbers over the last month and a half. But I'll tell you, Justin, the guy who looks really, really good coming down the stretch, at least for fantasy purposes, Humphries has put up some pretty good games. 10 for 79, 7 for 61, 6 for 54, 8 for 82, 7 for 76. These aren't like world-beating numbers by any means, but we could plug a guy like that in as your second flex, and he gets into the end zone too. I mean, he scored 5 touchdowns this season as well. He's a guy that again, you shouldn't have to pay much for, and he can really pay dividends for you in those bye weeks when you need him. Or injuries hit or whatever. Humphries is a perfect filler for that.
Yeah, we'll just see what Tampa Bay does with the quarterback position. They played musical chairs all season with Fitzpatrick and Winston. So going into next season, if they can bring in a new guy, that could disrupt a few things. I'm big on cohesiveness. So if they can keep one of these quarterbacks, I would like that for Humphries' chances.
Yeah, no question. And if Dirk Ketter's gone too, we'll see what they do at head coach too, as far as what offense will be bringing in. There should be some changeover down in Tampa. Donnie in New York writes, what are the chances that Philip Lindsay duplicates his stats from this season next year, guys? Thank you for the email, Donnie. Philip Lindsay, the first undrafted rookie to make a Pro Bowl, and now he's going to be an attractive fantasy draft pick this coming year as we look forward to the 2019 season. He's obviously going to be contending with Royce Freeman for touches, but that was the case this year, Justin, and he put up some pretty good numbers. Your thoughts on Lindsay next season?
Right. I took a look at his game logs, and there was only 3 games where he had more than 15 carries. So to me, that's a bit concerning. But I took a look at his yards per carry average, and it's over 5, and that is just gargantuan. I mean, Philip Lindsay runs the ball well. However, Denver is a team that looks like they don't know what direction they're going in, and it's kind of hard to take a running back on a team when your quarterback is Casey Keenum. There's going to be games where you're just totally game planned out of, not necessarily game planned out of, but the game flow is going to take you out of it. How many times are they going to be behind too much against the Chiefs? They can't compete against them. Stuff like that. It all just depends. He's just not on a team that I would recommend taking anybody on, Denver.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Is like we know Sutton and Hamilton will be the receivers next year. We don't know how Sanders is going to come back from that Achilles. Obviously, they've had some musical chairs at tight end on that team, and I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback. Is Case Keenum
you
going to be the starter under center?
You want to take all the position spots on your roster seriously. You just want to put yourself in the best percentage possible to be successful. So that's why you want to be on winning teams that year after year are in the playoffs, that put up points, that have quarterbacks that you can rely on. I mean, that's really the basics. That's what it's all about. I grew up just taking players that played with Peyton Manning, Reggie Wayne, Joseph Adai, Dallas Clark, or Edgerrin James all day. Same thing every year. It doesn't change. Peyton Manning's amazing. He's the best football player to ever step on the field, in my opinion. But that's just how you do it. and nothing should change.
And anytime you can get a piece of those offenses, too, especially when they're for whatever reason being downgraded in drafts where you can get some value on them, you got to hop all over that, and you can make some very successful fantasy teams doing that exact thing. Rick in Palestine, Texas. Hey, Dallas and Marcus, how do you handicap the Colts tight ends for 2019? Thanks so much. That is Rick in Palestine, Texas. This is an interesting one because, and I guess we're kind of speculating a little bit because Eric Ebron will be a free agent after this year. He's free to sign anywhere. But, man, the impact he had on Indianapolis, the rapport that he had with Andrew Luck, and the fact that, even when Doyle was healthy, I mean, he was putting up numbers, too, in that offense. I look at these two guys, and I feel like if they're both back in Indianapolis next year in a tight end premium format like the FFPC, I think both these guys have value, Justin.
Agree 100%. 120%. When Andrew Luck is healthy, which he hasn't been for a couple of years, Colts tight ends were always extremely productive. A couple seasons ago it was Dwayne Allen and Coby Fleener catching a bunch of touchdown passes. Where's Dwayne Allen now in New England? They don't even throw him the football. There's something about Andrew Luck and his tight ends in Indy, and it doesn't matter who they are. They're going to catch touchdowns all season, whether it was Doyle or Ebron or Mo Ali Cox or Eric Swoop. I mean, there was just an alarming rate of touchdown passes going to the tight end. Whoever's going to be in that position for Indianapolis is going to be highly successful. So I would rate them very high. If you're in the middle rounds and those first 5 names I mentioned earlier, Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle, Howard, Ebron, those guys are all gone. I mean, Doyle, I didn't name him earlier when I was throwing guys out there, but he is more than serviceable. He's a tough football player. He takes some big hits. They're no joke, Ebron and Doyle.
Yeah, and the fact that they were both good this year, and I know Doyle got hurt or whatever, but the fact that they're both good might drive their price down in drafts as well. There could be some value there as we look forward to 2019. Final email that we have tonight, it's from Mike in Gardena, California. What's up, Balky and the Champ? Is 2019 the year of D'Onta Foreman in the Texans' backfield, or do we have to endure another mediocre year of Lamar Miller again? Thanks for the email, Mike. In Gardena, California. This is interesting, too, because Lamar Miller, he had some good games this year, but by and large just didn't wow you. I mean, we kind of know who he is at this point in his career. D'Onta Foreman was just recently activated off, the IR to return list. We might see him in action this Sunday. I look at what, he was such a young guy coming out of Texas when the Texans drafted him in the second round. And the sky's the limit for him. I just don't know how he's going to respond from such a significant injury. I'm not ready, me personally, I'm not ready to anoint him as the guy in the Texans backfield in 2019. Maybe he takes that over at some point next season. I'm not going to be expecting a ton from him next year. I know that he's capable of really offering a lot of fantasy value. Just tough for me to get excited about him. How do you see the Texans backfield next year? I mean, are they going to go with Miller and Foreman? Do you see them drafting a running back high in maybe round 2 or 3 of the draft? Justin, what are your feelings there?
Well, it remains to be seen what they do in the draft, but what they have currently on their roster, backup Alfred Blue has shown absolutely nothing. So you could just punt him out of the equation. Lamar Miller, I've never been that high on him as well. It sounds like you're not that into Lamar Miller. I agree with you on that. D'Onta Foreman, just because of the opportunity with Blue not panning out, the Texans are a good team. You got to think that he could have a realistic shot at taking over the reins there. Maybe he does something in the playoffs and it just parlays his chances heading into 2019.
Justin, listen, great stuff from you for the whole hour tonight. I enjoyed picking your brain.
Thank you very much. It goes by so fast. I just wish that I could have got out a few different things. Before you know it, it's all over. But one more time, if anybody wants to shoot me an email, Justin Brandwein, WEIN @hotmail.com. I'd love to give you feedback to anything that you may ask fantasy-wise, baseball or football.
There you go. There you have it. And you can. It's not often when we have a high stakes winner on the show that's willing to dispense advice. But this $10,000 winner in the Super Bracket Challenge is willing to do it, and we certainly appreciate it. And hopefully you enjoyed hearing from Justin tonight. Justin, thanks so much for coming on. I wish you nothing but the best going forward in your 2019 leagues. I know that you'll be back with a vengeance and trying to take down Super Bracket again and whatever leagues you participate in. Thank you so much for joining the show, and we'll talk again soon, dude. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I hope so. It was a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I really meant it in the beginning when I said this was just as good as winning the money. I was very sincere when I said that because it is true.
Well, I appreciate that so much, man, and a happy New Year to you as well.
You too. Take care.
Thank you, Justin Brandwein, ladies and gentlemen, the 2018 FFPC Super Bracket $10,000 winner. Always good to hear from champions. And I got to tell you, over the next month and a half, you're going to hear from a lot of champions on this show. We're going to try to get on as many as possible. We'll hear their success stories. We'll find out why they did what they did and why it paid off this year and how you can take advantage of it to try to duplicate their success coming up in 2019. I want to thank Justin Brandwein, the FFPC, Rob, Bryce, and, of course, each and every one of you for listening in tonight. I know we did have some problems with the chat. We got the chat rocking probably about 15 minutes or so ago. It started working. And of course, Two-Packer and me are the lone participants in there for a great craft beer discussion that we've been holding in there. Always good stuff in there. We will be back live next week at the same time, 10/9 Central Friday night, and Dave Gerzak will be back in the studio. We'll have another high stakes champion on next week. That will be a lot of fun. Remember to check out the Rob Gallucci, Ryan Gotkin Off the Grid 2018 champs. That interview on the high stakes lowdown, not on rotoviz.com yet. You can go to the Spreaker website. Spreaker.com, search High Stakes Lowdown. It's the first thing that pops up. Go register for the world famous FFPC playoff challenge. It is filling up fast, almost a quarter full right now, and you have about 8 days to register. Happy New Year! Your weekend officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com that was broadcast live and heard around the world. Eric and Dave will be back next week with more analysis, interviews, and advice from a guest much smarter than they are. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk with you again next week.
You know, the more I do this show, this is the final show. I do a lot of shows, for like local radio and other podcasts during the week or whatever. This is the last show of the week that I always do, and it's always I'm always worried about how Dave Gerzak is going to attack me on the show for one of my inane opinions or takes. And tonight I didn't feel like that at all. And now I have to like sharpen my knives and get ready for Dave again next week. It will be fun. I love having him in here. And hopefully, I can tell you we will not have the FFPC main event champ in next week. There is a schedule conflict, and they can't. It's a couple of guys, and they can't appear next week. But maybe another six-figure champion on the show. It's certainly possible. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a happy and a safe New Year, and I will talk to you again next week with Dave Gerzak. Be good, everybody.